And welcome back to the Hot Lap. We are talking a Singapore Grand Prix qualifying where a certain George Russell came out of nowhere seemingly to get a pole position, particularly if you look at their practice times, which were, I want to say, meh, especially when Mr. Russell yeeted it into the wall yesterday. What an absolute comeback. So George Russell, congratulations for your second pole position of the year, your first pole position at Singapore. And I don't think they were looking, I mean, when you look at yesterday, they've pretty much done a Red Bull like a full turnaround. They were struggling so much. And in particular, also special mention for a certain Kimi Antonelli, but we'll get into them when we do the driver ratings for qualifying, the winners and losers. So George Russell secures a pole position. This, at least, is the qualifying result with Max Verstappen in second, just shy of a couple of tenths off. But it was the McLarens that were quite a surprise. Piastri, 4 tenths off nearly. Kimi Antonelli just a few hundredths slower than Piastri in fourth. Wouldn't have been great for Kimi to get that third, but what an outstanding, bear in mind the up and down season that Kimi Antonelli has had. Really good. Lando Norris, the big loser there out of the championship contenders, 4.428 seconds off. And then just over half a second was Lewis Hamilton, and just under a tenth slower was Lewis Hamilton's teammate, Charles Leclerc. Now, Isaac Hadjar 8th, well done again for getting into that top 10. Also, special mention for Ollie Behrman, 7 tenths off in 9th. That is not bad at all, beating Fernando Alonso. So, what happened to the Ferrari place and what happened to the Aston Martin place? Seemingly in the practice sessions, do they just have their engines turned up? Now, there was a theory around Ferrari, which I might get into in a bit later when we talk about them, but Nico Hülkenberg in 11th, just didn't make it into that, but out-qualified, finally, showing really decent pace compared to Bortoletto. In 12th, Alexander Albon, 13th, Carlos Sainz. Both Williams is not particularly good around here, but I didn't think they would be on this high downforce circuit. Liam Lawson, 14th, kind of disappointing. Again, beaten by Isaac Hadjar. However, maybe he was being a bit careful simply because his favourite ice cream seemed to be Walls in Singapore. Yeah. Sorry, Liam. 15th was Yuki Tsunoda. 16th, disappointing again for Yuki Tsunoda. 16th, Gabriel Bortoletto. 17th, Lance Stroll. Colapinto there, out qualifying in 18th. His teammate Esteban Ocon, disappointing again in 19th. 20th, Pierre Gasly. So this is the grid. Not much change. There is a but, though. And the but is Williams could be disqualified. We'll get into that later. By the time you read this, they may well be disqualified. Read this? I mean, watch this video. What am I talking about? So Max then. Let's talk about qualifying. And Max Verstappen is moderately upset at Lando Norris, feeling that he was impeded. He said it will be remembered. Now, the interview was done. We'll get that clip of the interview with the three of them, with Piastri, I think, there, because that was your top three. Lando wasn't there, and it was sort of said tongue-in-cheek. I think a lot more is being made out of it than it really is. But let's have a look. So Max Verstappen called out Oscar Piastri's teammate Lando Norris in Singapore. He said, "I believe there might have been a mistake in the final sector," was the question. And he said, "Yeah, that's what happens when a car in front of you is cruising 2 seconds ahead. So that's noted, will be remembered as well." I think he meant that tongue-in-cheek. And they asked who was it, and he said it wasn't Oscar. This is the moment.
There might have been a mistake towards the end of the lap, the final sector.
Yeah, that's what happens when there's a car in front of you just cruising 2 seconds in front. So that's noted.
And it was
well.
It wasn't Oscar.
Who was that? We didn't see that on screen.
Not Oscar.
Yeah, I mean, he said it kind of like, I think he said it tongue-in-cheek. Maybe I'm wrong. He looked a bit more angry at that, but it will be remembered. I mean, that's a bit. I mean, if he meant that if he didn't mean it tongue-in-cheek, bit childish. But I think he was. I'd like to think it was tongue-in-cheek. But here is Lando Norris's retort. He basically came out and said they always complain. They complain about everything. That's Red Bull. Yeah, I mean, you got a point, haven't you? This is the Williams position at the moment as of what? 5:45 at the time I'm recording on the 4th of October. And they said the uppermost rear wing element adjustable positions were checked on cars number 23 and 55, which Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz respectively. Now both cars exceeded the maximum amount of 85mm on both sides of the rear wing outer area. This was not in compliance with said article. They're referring in the matter. Now, the last time something similar like that happened, Lewis Hamilton, 2021, with his DRS wing. Goodbye, disqualified to the back. Just saying. So, it's more than likely going to be a stone bonker, isn't it? So, between that there, but they are certainly the big stories. This is the moment. If I could just close out. This is the moment Max Verstappen lost the time. You can just about see Lando Norris ahead there. That's that. He's the little dot there. And so he's a couple of seconds ahead. Yeah, like 1, 2. And as he turns in, he doesn't really lock up. He doesn't get a decent turn, and he misses the apex. And this is where I think he loses a lot of speed. He kind of blames Norris, like gives him like, what is it? Yeah, well done, mate. Yeah, get in there. It's going to happen at Singapore. It's one of those things. He wasn't holding him up. It wasn't on purpose. Lando Norris is not going to get any penalty. It's just really, really unfortunate. A lot of people suggested that Max might be up. He may well have been on pole had it not been for that. So maybe George Russell needs to thank Lando Norris and send Lando Norris a thank you card for that. But moving on though, McLaren. Yeah, let's get into the data, shall we? McLaren's best lap in 25 quali was only 0.01 thousandths faster than their best lap in 2024. That's slightly concerning, isn't it? So the 24 car equally as fast? The issue is we'll never know, because there's a lot changes with the conditions, the tyres they're using, how hot the track is, but you wouldn't expect that. Bear in mind, McLaren have been consistently, maybe up until recently, the best car. So, P6 and P7 for Ferrari. Disappointing, really, I think. They showed a lot more pace coming in. And the reason I want to focus on Ferrari is because the whole thing's fairly disappointing, really. They were looking like good. Hamilton even was fastest in the first qualifying in the first qualifying in Q1. And he said, and I think this is quite interesting from Lewis. He said, if you look at Mercedes, they were out first and they didn't lose any tyre temperature. We're waiting and turning the car off at the end of the pit lane, just ends up losing 5 or 6 degrees, and it's really hard to get that back in an out lap. And as we know, when it's really hot, Mercedes aren't, reportedly in this new ground effect area. When it was super hot, Mercedes not particularly good. In the cooler conditions, Las Vegas, and now here in Singapore, not too bad at all. So maybe Lewis does have a point. Leclerc came out and said, I don't have the right feeling with the car, and what's strange is that it's on street circuits where I'm usually comfortable. Mercedes on pole, no explanation. I guess they found something we didn't. And I love look at the use of his face there. It's brilliant, isn't it? Let's now get into the data. As you can see here, here's a lovely bar chart from F1 telemetry data on the fastest to the slowest. The slowest obviously being Pierre Gasly, who did a whoopsie. George Russell the fastest. Max Verstappen just a couple of tenths shy. And Oscar Piastri just 4 tenths shy, along with Antonelli. So that's your top 2 rows. Norris, as we know, didn't do particularly good, did he? He was, to be fair, he was within a tenth of Piastri, but it felt once again coming here that Oscar Piastri was the weaker of the 2 drivers in the practice sessions. And then Hamilton obviously out qualifying Leclerc, which is quite good. Now, in terms of track dominance, obviously Russell's going to be more, but let's look at where that track dominance is. Because when you look at it, when we go around it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So as we're coming here, very good in the medium speed corner here, and Russell basically maintains it up until this would have been the breaking point where it's all about Verstappen. But once you get on the power, a medium speed corner here, and it's Piastri. But as we know, those Mercedes were at least in practice, particularly fast down the straights. There's the proof there. And again, in the slower, in the slow corner, it's all about Max Verstappen, the slow medium corner. But again, this is not a straight. That Mercedes really working well in the slow corner there, and then going down the straight there. Again, another medium speed corner for Piastri. Verstappen in the slow corner, the straight, all about Mercedes. But then 14 and 15, all the way here down the straight, is all about Max Verstappen. And then it's really interesting to see that, isn't it? So when we look at the DRS delta, who is the fastest? Are Mercedes the fastest? Well, let's have a look, shall we? Mercedes on 316, they're not the fastest. The fastest seem to be Aston Martin on 317 and Alpine. McLaren, once again, the slowest on 314 with that DRS. But even if you take the DRS away, they're on 270, which is the 3rd slowest, other than Williams and VCARB, which is interesting. But once again, have McLaren gone down to the downforce? This is a high downforce circuit. Have they put maybe a bit of extra downforce on to protect those tyres? This is a circuit that is hard, but not impossible to overtake. It's not Monaco. You can overtake it. It is a bit risky though, and you need, like they say, like your car needs to be so much faster than the car ahead, but you just need to wait for a mistake as well, and give them, and give the other guy a chance. So moving on from that, as we here's the top speeds in bar chart from 317 for Antonelli, Colapinto, and Stroll. Sadly, Stroll couldn't use that speed to get out of Q1, but there we go. When we look at the slowest, it's Hadjar Lawson, but then Hadjar, in spite of being the slowest, he's up there in Q3, wasn't he? Norris 313 and Piastri 314 again amongst the slowest, but then Verstappen on 314. So what does that say? It was Tsunoda on 316 that was the fastest of the two Red Bulls. Maybe Red Bull have gone down that downforce and they're looking after their tyres, which is why they've been quite good. This obviously in the race is going to be a lot different to Baku and Monza in relation to what the tyres are going to do. In terms of throttle usage, VCarb leads that on 61%, all the way down to 50.1% with Alpine. But what does it mean? I'm never really sure, because McLaren on 51.7%. It's all to do with how they set the car up, and that is a massive difference between VCarb, the first and the second people. So VCarb on 61% of that throttle usage, and Aston Martin on 55.4%. I mean, that is pretty massive, isn't it? Is that partial throttle, full throttle? There we go. There, lift and braking. I mean, in terms of the braking, it's fairly even amongst the 20%, unless you are Piastri or Verstappen, who own the 18 and the 19.1 and the 18.8 with Norris in terms of how much you're on the brakes. Hamilton quite high on the brakes on 20.8%. In terms of lifting, it's interesting that both the McLaren drivers are lifting the most, yet I was saying about the downforce, so that almost contradicts my point in a way. So there we go. It's just data, isn't it? What does it mean? What does it mean? Now, this is the interesting bit here. 2024 versus 2025. So, Alpine are about 2/10 slower. McLaren, we did say 1/1000th faster, but 0.0. Ferrari 0.06. Haas 0.25 faster. The only ones that are slower are Alpine. 0.26 faster for Aston Martin. Pretty much the same for Williams. 0.34 for Red Bull. 0.44 for VCarb. 0.68 for Mercedes, which is really, really significant. Not as big as the 1.43 for Kick Sauber. They are really good. Is it Audi then kicking them into shape going into 2026? Again, Mercedes, though, nicely done. That's really good, isn't it? Top speeds, we've already seen the top. We've already done the top speeds there, but that's another look at it if you're interested. But this is interesting. Sector 1, fastest sector. Sector 1, George Russell on a 26.4. Kimi Antonelli on a 26.4 as well. We're talking hundreds. 0.415 for Russell, 0.482 for Kimi Antonelli. I mean, we're talking tiny bits. But then it's Verstappen, not Piastri, that is third. I mean, he is just shy of a tenth off the fastest of George Russell. Sector 2, again, it is George Russell, 37.329. And Kimi Antonelli 37.413, so within a tenth. And again, Verstappen just thousandths off that. And it's the last sector. If you are looking at Kimi Antonelli here, and all the way down, he did not have a good last sector, and that's potentially why he's out the top three on a 24.4. But it's Max Verstappen on a 25.2. It's a fairly fast section as well. But then again, that's why with their top speeds, they are quite fast. But then it's Hamilton, third for 25.285, which is quite interesting. And Hamilton, the fastest of the two Ferraris by about a tenth. So there's not that much in between them. When we're looking at slowest, it's Bortoleto, Gasly, then Colapinto. Not really surprising when we're looking at the slowest drivers to see, obviously, the Alpines, both Alpines there. Now, when we want to look at the McLarens, Piastri had the fourth fastest Sector 1. He had the second, the sixth fastest Sector 2. And, wow, I mean, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The eighth fastest Sector 3 had Piastri. Norris was fastest Sector 2 and Sector 3, but he kind of lost, 3/4 of a tenth, as you can see here, compared to Piastri. Piastri in Sector 1, Piastri did a 26.556, and Norris doing a 26.629 in that first sector. But it's always interesting, but there you go. That's the sectors. Sector 1 and Sector 3 seem to be quite fast, and Sector 2 is all about those, the corners. But Mercedes doing really well here. Maybe the other reason why they didn't quite match Verstappen here, George Russell, and in particular Kimi Antonelli, is experience with Kimiata in terms of looking after those tyres until the last sector. As we know, those soft tyres were quite delicate. You could get 2 runs out of them if you really, really looked after them and had a mega cool-down lap. But still, maybe Verstappen's car is looking after those tyres better than the Mercedes. Maybe. And that's obviously the, qualifying again. So let's now we've spoken about our big data, so to speak, our data. Let's now get into, as I take a drink, let's get into the winners and losers of qualifying. So welcome to it is not Azerbaijan. I've absolutely no idea why it says Azerbaijan, so bear with me 1 minute. We are most certainly gonna delete that, aren't we? Azerbaijan was the other day. What are we thinking? So this is now where we are going to discuss the winners and losers of qualifying for the Singapore Grand Prix. Let's start off with the losers. All right, let's start off with the negative thing. And last but no means least, normally but definitely least today, is this guy here. And his name is Pierre Gasly for yeeting it into, out of qualifying. A lot more experience than his teammate. We don't really expect that. I do wonder, does this show that the Alpine, at least in Singapore, is really hard to drive? Not that is much of an excuse. So the person that I'd want to put, I'd say probably equal with Gasly, is Esteban Ocon. Overall, he's just not been particularly, Oliver Behrman's really showed him up this weekend. Sometimes it might not always be Ocon's fault. But yeah, it's going to raise a few eyebrows, isn't it? His current form of late, I feel. And raising no eyebrows, and if I'm honest, absolutely no surprises, is this man here, Lance of the Stroll, out of Q1, just not good enough. Aston Martin, get rid of him. I know you're not going to, but that's going to fall on deaf ears, obviously, isn't it? So this guy, he qualified 16th, out-qualified Lance Stroll, but compared to Nico Hülkenberg's 11th, the reason why I'm putting Bortoleto in the negative, at this point, you kind of expect more from him. So yeah, not the end of the world, but still not particularly great. The next negative is going to be Franco Colapinto. He seems to be here consistently. However, well done for out-qualifying Pierre Gasly. That was not too bad, Mr. Franco, but you're still down there in the losers, sadly. And then also, obviously, Yuki Tsunoda, partly not to blame because Red Bull can't sort that second car out. It is a Max Verstappen car. I don't care what people say at this point. It very much is, in my opinion at least, it very much is. But still, Yuki, a 1:30.353, and that is ultimately from pole. That's 1.2 seconds off. And Max Verstappen was within a tenth, was within 0.2 of pole. So, not good enough, Yuki Tsunoda. And there's all these rumours that he's gone for next year. It's getting harder and harder to justify him keeping in. However, I'm sure one day we're going to find out the real story where Max Verstappen's teammates are struggling so much. And yes, it is partly Max Verstappen's amazing talent, but it's partly the car as well. You can't tell me otherwise. Tsunoda is not a second slower than Max Verstappen. Absolutely no way. Another negative, Carlos Sainz, after the absolute highs of Baku, bearing in mind they might be disqualified. I imagine if I was a betting man, they probably will be disqualified simply because of the wearing infringement. It's not within the standard, I think 85 or 86 millimeters. So yeah, it pretty much means they're going to be out. But and even though they were allegedly had a cheating car, supposedly, obviously not on purpose, I'd imagine, not really good enough. And what's always interesting is when we look at Carlos Sainz and who's next, obviously Alexander Albon. In the qualifying result, Alexander Albon did a 1:30.202. Carlos Sainz a 1:30.235. Now, when I think your teammates are that close to each other, it means that's probably the maximum they can also get out of the car. So yeah, not particularly good for any of the Williams. Next up is Liam Lawson, again 14th after a really good Baku, really, really bad practice. But we're just looking at qualifying. Isaac Hadjar showed him up again. Not good enough, is it, really, for Liam Lawson? Is he going to go as well? I like the guy. I hope not. I love the fact that we have someone from New Zealand in there. He needs more. He needs to do more. We need Baku Liam, not Singapore Liam at the next race. So, Lando Norris, why is he a negative? He's up there in 5th. Well, because he's about a 10th off Oscar Piastri. But he looked like the better McLaren driver again, all the way through the practice session. And then when it comes down to it, no. Oscar Piastri. And, you know, in the moment, again, is it a choke Norris? Not quite, but is it peak Norris? Absolutely not. Now, let's get to the positives. And our first positive, Nico Hülkenberg finally out-qualifying his Gabriel Bortoleto. Yeah, it seems Bortoleto has been like on him all the time. So, the next positive, though, is this man here. It's Fernando Alonso. In 10th position, potentially getting that point. But still, he's there. Aston Martin, flattered to deceive, a bit like Ferrari maybe, but yeah, just about getting into it. I want to say like neutral rather than positive, really, is Charles Leclerc, slower than Lewis Hamilton on street track. We know Hamilton's really good here, but yeah, just about positive because 6th and 7th, best of the rest, really. When you look at that, after Mercedes, McLaren, and Max. It's the best they could have done, which is then why I put Hamilton slightly above Leclerc, simply because he out-qualified Leclerc. What they're going to do in the race, well, we know the race can be really interesting, but they're both, you know, over half a second off George Russell. So you have to wonder what they are going to do. If it's going to be like one of those Monaco races where everyone's managing their pace, maybe between the two of them they can do something different. We know there's a 100% chance of a safety car, I think, here as well. I think. Or a very high chance, if not 100% chance. Next up we have Isaac Hadjar, who qualified 8th, again in the top 10. Well done, Isaac Hadjar. Potentially Rookie of the Year. Sadly, might be going to Red Bull next year because of his awesome performances. But the only saving grace is it's going to be a completely different car. But anyway, let's talk Singapore qualifying. Really, really good. Well done, Isaac Hadjar. Very positive. And also, a massive positive, we'll get to in a bit, is this man here, Ollie Behrman. Oliver Behrman, yeah, he qualified 9th, and I'm hoping he gets points much higher, obviously than his teammate. If he can get points, that'll be the chef's kiss. And if he can get, with the people he's got ahead of him, you got Isaac Hadjar, the Ferrari. If he can beat anyone ahead of him, legit, amazing, potentially man of the race. Oscar Piastri, yeah, he's a bit far down. He qualified 3rd. McLaren are in one of the best cars. Part of me wonders, as Martin Brundle came out and said something really interesting, is Max Verstappen now getting into the heads of both McLaren drivers? I think, personally, Oscar Piastri is just really, really happy to make it round into qualifying after his absolutely horrible Baku, Azerbaijan experience. He needs to get that off his back. Could he win the race? I do think, given McLaren are looking after their tyres, if not just as good, maybe better. Their race pace in practice seemed to be better, just by about a tenth and a couple of tenths than Max Verstappen in the Red Bull. But you know what's going to happen with George Russell, and that's the big thing here. So Max Verstappen, a lot of people, and it's hard to blame, potentially favourite for the race. A lot depends on what's going to happen in turn number 1. He is against George Russell. And let's be fair, if there's a likely combination of something happening at the front runners in turn 1, you put George Russell and Max Verstappen next to each other on the front row. Yeah. And why is that? Well, we'll get to that in a bit when we talk about George Russell. But he's 3rd in our well done winners of qualifying. In 2nd, beating out, because I think, yes, he did just off the qualifying podium, so to speak, in terms of starting 4th in that 2nd row. But well done, Kimi Antonelli. It would have been so easy just to meet a wall, yeet it into a wall like some others have done. In practice, he didn't. He kept it together. He got 4th. He's he is about 4 tenths off George Russell, but I think of the story of where he's come up until now with these ups and downs of his year. Well done, Kimi Antonelli. We are really, really proud of you. And obviously, the man of qualifying, George Russell, the unsigned George Russell, the free agent. Hello, everyone, for 2026, because Toto Wolff wants to metaphorically marry Max Verstappen, seemingly, and it must really hurt. It doesn't really help. I mean, Toto, we've done a video of how ridiculous and unprofessional that is, doing it, on purpose in the public sphere. It's pathetic. And it's the only time, really, it's one of the few times I've disliked Toto Wolff. Up until then, I thought he was a fairly decent team boss. But yeah, so well done, George Russell, in spite of everything, showing why you should be re-signed with Mercedes. Now, the last time he got pole in Canada, he won the race. Can he do it here? Well, it is harder to overtake than in Canada. Is it his to lose? It's going to be interesting. That first corner, he just cannot let Max Verstappen by, which is why I think there's a very good chance of a clash. Both of them, let's be fair, I doubt they share the Christmas. They're going to share Christmas cards or birthday cards. But it's going to be a really interesting first corner, isn't it? Also, with, you know, the championship challenger, the championship leader in third, and Lando Norris very much needs to make up time and space as well, doesn't he? So there we go. So that's the qualifying result. This is the grid. We'll speak to you. We will speak to you soon. Thank you very much. If you made it to the end, please consider giving us a subscribe. That would be lovely. If you're not subscribed and you think we've earned it, if you don't want to miss a video, there's also that notifications button. But until then, we'll speak to you soon. Thank you so much for watching, but above all else, stay safe.